Shalom. It's wonderful to be here. You know, I've been working for the Jewish Agency now for more than 16 years, but had someone told me maybe just 2 or 3 years ago that I would be standing in a room full of Christian leaders from Africa, I would have told them that they're probably crazy. But here I am, and and why is that, my friends? And please allow me to call you my friends. Why is that? Because I believe, and I assume that you believe as well, that we are so very fortunate to be living in these prophetic times. And in these prophetic times, we can see the unfolding and the realization of prophecy and of miracles. And so it is no coincidence, and it is surely no craziness, that you Christian leaders of Africa have come here to Israel and are meeting with myself, and I say that with all the humility because you met with our great leader, Mr. Natan Sharansky, and it is my honor to be able to speak to you today about the work that we are doing and about how we are all connected in this magnificent and challenging work. So to give you just a glimpse, rather than me having to talk you through 80 years of work of the Jewish Agency, I'd like to give you a little glimpse through a short video we prepared. Please.
What we have done since 1929.
אני מאמין שזה תהיה התחלתה של הגאולה, והגאולה תבוא בזמנה.
The plain of Jezreel, stretching from Haifa on the west to the Jordan, is now alive with Jewish agricultural settlements.
Get the children out at least. Bring them to Palestine, Israel, the Jewish national home.
For Jews from the four corners of the world, this is the long-awaited moment. This is homecoming.
אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל. היא מדינת ישראל.
Operation Magic Carpet, the dramatic airlift that rescued almost 50,000 Yemenite Jews. And now that planes have just arrived from Iraq and Iran.
The pioneers carry on the work of building up a national home.
Ben-Gurion repeats, only the dreamers are the realists.
The Jewish Agency, with the support of UJA, moved into immediate action as the gates of Aliyah opened wide.
The Israeli government put in action a plan called Project Renewal.
Almost the entire Jewish community left in Ethiopia were rescued.
After almost 2 years of civil war, this Jewish community from Sarajevo were brought to Israel by the Jewish Agency.
Partnership has been to me the most rewarding part of being a volunteer in the Jewish world.
We need more people to come here to see what Israel is like, to experience what I just experienced during this trip.
I believe Jewish community all over the world can make this place better by working with us.
We're here to listen. We're here to help. With us, you're never alone.
אני מתכבדת להזמין את מר זאב ביילסקי, יושב ראש הנהלת הסוכנות היהודית, אל שולחן הנשיאות לקבל את הפרס.
Being a shaliach for me is bringing the real face of Israel that people here don't usually get to see.
I really believe that we are all responsible for each other all over the world.
My connection to Israel has definitely strengthened since I've been here, experienced the culture, spoke with people even more than I expected it would.
מאפשרים גם לעולים וגם לעובדים להתאוורר, לצאת להפוגות. זה מדהים, אני פשוט גאה להיות כאן.
The Jewish Agency was instrumental in founding and building the State of Israel, and continues to serve as the link between Israel and Jewish communities everywhere, bringing Jews to Israel and Israel to Jews.
You like that? Yeah. We can move to the PowerPoint, please. So, I guess you can get a little bit of a feeling of why I am so proud to work for the Jewish Agency. You know, when you talk about 3 million Olim that were brought home to Israel since 1948, each one of those people is a face, is a human being, is a story. I can share with you that my grandparents were among those Olim that in 1949 were brought home to Israel from Iran. At that time, believe it or not, the Jewish Agency had a full office in Iran, had a youth village that operated in Iran and rescued children who were survivors of the Holocaust. And my grandparents came full of faith from the bustling city of Tehran and were warmly welcomed by the Jewish Agency to their first home in Israel, which was a tent. And they lived in that tent for about a year. Don't worry, they don't live there anymore. After a tent, they were upgraded to a metal shack. After 2 years of living in the metal shack, they moved to their current home, which is the first Olim neighborhood and the first Olim city area of Jerusalem, Kiryat Yovel. My grandmother lives there to this day. That's where she became the mother of 12 children, the grandmother of 60 grandchildren, and she's not even counting the great-grandchildren because she's so afraid of the evil eye. So each and every one of these people is a world entire, and being that we all believe that we have all been made in the image of God, the work that we do, we believe, is truly a small way of us to fulfill our role in this world and to do what God has intended for us to do. And again, I say this modestly because we can only try and hope to understand what God's plan is for all of us. So when you go to the next slide. I believe, and you believe, that God has made an everlasting covenant with the Jewish people. And we are now living in these prophetic times. This means that each and every one of you can have a role to play in fulfilling these biblical prophecies. It is in our lifetime that we can see how after 2,000 years of exile, the Jewish people have returned to their home to build their national homeland and establish a state, what could have only been perceived as an implausible, unbelievable dream. But as David Ben-Gurion said, quoting from past sages, only the dreamers are the realists. And I believe that all of you here today are dreamers. You have dreams for Africa, you have prayers for Africa, and you see your connection, your link with Israel. Am I right? Yes. Can you move into the next? So I'd like to take you on a little journey, if you will, around the world and to give you a little taste of the work that we do, and perhaps through that you'll be able to understand what could be lessons or insights for you in the work that you're trying to do for Africa and about how we are all connected. So please, the next slide. You can see here, these are the main circles of our activity at the Jewish Agency. Promoting Aliyah, promoting, do y'all know what the word Aliyah means? Should I explain it for? Okay. Aliyah means to go up. It means ascension. It is a word in Hebrew that has been used for centuries. It's used mainly in religious connotations, When you have a Jewish synagogue, there's always an elevated space in the synagogue from which the Torah, the Bible, is read. And when a person goes up to read in the Bible, to speak to the community, they make an aliyah. They go up, they become leaders, representatives, and in a way closer to God. And it is believed that when a Jewish person comes back home to the land of Israel, they go up spiritually, they make an aliyah. We do not refer to this as immigration, as people moving, as a job relocation. We call it aliyah, ascension, people that are going up. So, you like that? So we focus on aliyah. We focus on connecting Jewish communities around the world with their Jewish identity and with Israel as the cornerstone of that Jewish identity. We focus on connecting Jews in Israel to the rest of the Jewish world, realizing that we are all one people, we are all links in a chain, and we focus on helping vulnerable populations in Israel. And when I say vulnerable populations in Israel, I mean all of Israel's citizens, no matter their ethnicity, their faith, their religion, their background, all groups in society in Israel. So let me take you on a little journey around the world so you can meet a little bit of these people and give some faces to this work that we have done. Please. Aliyah and absorption. You can see here a map of what Aliyah looked like in 2016. We're now already towards the second half of 2017. The numbers are pretty similar, in some cases somewhat higher, somewhat lower. It's important that you know that Aliyah is now at a climax as far as the past 10 to 12 years. The last 3 years have been higher than the previous decade. And one of the people that I'd like you to meet is Surafel, one of the people who made Aliyah this past year. He made Aliyah from Ethiopia. And as I imagine you know, the parts of Ethiopia where Jews are coming from are very rural, very based on agriculture and very simple kinds of professions. Surafel never attended a school, did not know how to read and write. And soon after he came to Israel from Ethiopia, his parents went through a very tough crisis. They divorced. The father moved out and left Surafel and his mother in the absorption center where they came to. Surafel was completely despaired. He started acting out. He didn't do well in school with all the challenges that he had to go through, learning a new language, sitting on a school chair for the first time in his life, becoming an Israeli. He had also this horrible heartache to deal with, and he just wasn't making it. The staff of the absorption center rallied around him and provided him with a positive way of using this energy. They sent him to, what do boys like to do? Martial arts. They sent him to a martial arts class and worked with him intensively on his Hebrew, on computers, on getting him acquainted with the basics of math. And I can tell you, a year later, believe it or not, Surafel is already top of his class. And this is not an immigrant class. This is a regular Israeli native-born class. He's top of his class, and his dream is to become an Air Force pilot because he realizes that the sky, even that, is not the limit. So this is just one boy, Surafel, and now we're looking that in the coming year we'll be welcoming to Israel some 1,800 Olim from Ethiopia. We have already welcomed some 500. This is a huge challenge for us, and we're very proud to undertake it. Next slide, please. The second area, when we look at Jewish people around the world, we're all concerned with this question of belonging, of identity. You have your African diaspora in different parts of the world. How do you make people feel proud of their heritage, not get lost in secularization? That is a primary area of our work. We work in 80 countries around the world. We reach 1 million people every year. The Jewish people, there are 13 million. In Israel, we have about 7 million, so you can do the math. So we reach virtually 1 in 6 people outside of Israel every year of the Jewish people to try and foster in them this light, this connection to Israel. I'd like to introduce you to one of these people. This is Dima. Do you recognize who he's trying to be? Somebody guess? Who is he getting dressed up as? Who are we talking about before? Only the dreamers are the realists, the chairman of the Jewish Agency, became prime minister of the state of Israel. Hint, hint. Ben Gurion, very good. Who said that? 10 points. You can compete later on. He's being dressed up as Ben Gurion. He told me, Misha, that he is the last Jewish boy of Bojomi, a small village in Georgia that makes horrible mineral water. Don't try to drink it if you go to Georgia, it's bad. The last Jewish boy of his village in Bojomi. He knew that he was Jewish. His father died when he was 5 years old and made his mother promise that she will raise Misha a Jew. But she had no idea how to do that. 7 years of communism, she had no Jewish identity. They were the only Jewish family in the village. She did not know what that meant. The only thing Misha knew was that he is a Jew and that he is hated. That went on until he was 10 years old, when the Jewish Agency invited him to a summer camp that we ran in Georgia. In that summer camp, it might sound to you like all fun and games, but it's so much more than that. That's where they had his first Shabbat, his first Jewish prayer, his first interaction with other Jewish kids. All of a sudden, this boy, this one last Jewish boy, Misha of Bojomi, Georgia, became among these hundreds of Jewish kids just like him. He received an identity, he received a choice. And the choice he made with that identity, because I believe that without identity, without knowledge, you cannot really make a choice. You cannot truly decide that you belong to Israel, to Africa. He made a choice, and the choice he made was to become a leader for the Jewish community in Georgia. Today he's a student, he's active in our young leadership group, he's leading activities, and here he's dressed up as Ben Gurion because he aims high. Maybe one day after he makes Aliyah, he'll become the next Bibi Netanyahu, who knows? So that's Misha from Bojomi. Next slide, please. Connect young Israelis to the Jewish people and to their Jewish identity. It's not enough to be a person who was born and raised in Israel, to have this understanding of who you are. What is your role as a link in a chain? I'm sure that you also see this in your communities. It's not evident that just because you go to church, your children will go to church. Your children will have your set of values. How do you infuse that? Next slide, please. These are Lisa, the young lady, and Anna, a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor. We recruited Lisa as part of a national program where we reach Israeli students, we offer them a scholarship, and we give them a full leadership training program in which they learn about their identity, about their connection to the rest of the Jewish world, and about their responsibility. You are not just a student learning and then hoping to move to Tel Aviv and become successful. You have responsibility. You are a link in a chain. Lisa began volunteering with Anna. Anna, the Holocaust survivor, said that throughout her life, throughout all the atrocities she went through in Auschwitz and in the death marches, and you'll be visiting Yad Vashem, so you'll be learning more about this, she only survived thanks to the goodness and the kindness of the people she met along the way. And today, as she's 92 years old, that she cannot leave her home, she's very weak, she's very frail, and when Lisa comes to visit her, she feels that Lisa is one of these good people that help her continue to live. When Lisa comes to visit her, she forgets that she's 92 years old. She feels young, she feels alive. So Lisa and Anna are just one pair of some 400,000 Israelis that we work with on all kinds of different levels, uplifting the weak, fostering leadership, and caring for the vulnerable. Supporting vulnerable populations. This is the car of Inbal and Udi Azrak. These are Inbal and Udi and their new baby boy Noam. The picture you saw of their car, isn't it unbelievable that they survived? That they got out of that alive? A miracle? They were driving the car, having a date night out in Jerusalem. You know, parents with 2 little children, it's kind of exciting to have a date night. They go out on a date, and a Molotov cocktail, an explosive bottle, gets thrown in their car in Jerusalem. Inbal gets burns all over her body. Somehow Udi gets her rolling out of the car. They survive. The car is completely burnt. She goes through months and months of excruciating treatments in the hospital. She manages to start to rebuild her life. She has 2 little children at home. And against all these odds and all these difficulties, she decides that the way for her to heal is to bring new life into the world. And so at the same hospital where she was treated for the most horrific burns you can imagine, where she went through the most excruciating pain, that is the same place where she brought new life into the world, and she named her new baby Noam, meaning pleasantness. The assistance she received from the Jewish Agency's Fund for Victims of Terror went to assist her in areas where the government of Israel simply fell short. And the Jewish Agency has very strong connections with the government of Israel, and I do not mean by any way to criticize the government of Israel, but a government is a government. It's a big bureaucracy. It works according to rules and regulations. It's not always sensitive to what people need, and they can't bend those rules. Our Fund for Victims of Terror does exactly that, meets the people where they need assistance. And she says that with all this excruciating physical pain, and then the emotional pain, and the hardships of going through the bureaucracy of receiving her rights from the government as a victim of terror, the assistance she got from our fund reminded her that there is a huge people behind this title, the Jewish Agency for Israel. It gave her a feeling that all of the Jewish people is somehow behind her, assisting her, and she prays that may she be able to give back the favor, may she be able to not need this kind of assistance, and may we not need to have a fund for victims of terror at all in the future. But since we started our Fund for Victims of Terror, we have already assisted over 6,000 individuals in Israeli society. So to take you back a little bit to where we meet. You see here the images of this miraculous journey into Israel, of the Exodus ship bringing to Israel refugees from the Holocaust. So what is the connection with you? What is the connection with the people of the nations who seek to bless Israel? Are you familiar with this verse? Can someone tell me how they interpret it? Would you like to? We see this happening. We see, since already the first Zionist Congress back in 1897, we see it through the time of the Great Exodus from the former Soviet Union in the 1990s. We see it today, that it's Christian friends of Israel around the world who help us and work with us to bring the Jewish people back home for Israel. If it's through prayer, if it's through volunteering, if it's through giving, we see it happening. And we believe that each and every one of you can find the place where that role can be fulfilled. And just to give you a small taste, you saw in the movie before, Operation Solomon, 14,500 Jews brought to Israel in 36 hours. Is that a miracle or not? The greatest civilian airlift in history. We got into the Guinness Book of Records for two reasons. One, it was the largest civilian airlift in history. Two, it was the most crowded flight in history. We had over 1,000 people on one of those planes. Every plane in Israel was recruited for this. It was a huge cooperation between the Israeli government, the IDF, the Air Force, the Secret Service, and the Jewish Agency that led the operation from the ground in Addis Ababa. You see the crowded plane? The war in Sarajevo, you saw this also in the movie, 1992. Thousands of Jews besieged in a city, no coming, no going. And yet, through different maneuverings and different assistance, the Jewish Agency managed to go in and bring out some 5,000 Jews and airlift them to Israel the very next day. The crisis in Ukraine. Are you familiar with the story of the war in Ukraine? This has been going on now for well over 2 years, and it's somehow being kept fairly quiet by the different news agencies. A civil war. Over 1 million people are displaced in their own country. 1 million people becoming refugees in their own country. I'm sure that you're familiar with this reality in Africa, that you have horrific things going on and you're asking, why is the world silent? Why is the world not assisting? It's happening as we speak in Ukraine. We have been able to come in and bring out over 30,000 of our people to home in Israel safely from these war zones. And you see here part of the joy of Aliyah, the joy of coming home to Israel. France, a Western, modern country with every kind of privilege, a wonderful welfare country. Would you believe that just in the past 5 years, some 30,000 of its citizens made the choice to leave, to come home to Israel? Because of rising anti-Semitism, because of a feeling that perhaps Europe is no longer their home. And we don't want this to happen for any Jewish community in the world. Nobody wants war. Nobody wants anti-Semitism. You know, sometimes Natan Sharansky is asked, well, anti-Semitism brings Aliyah, but anti-Semitism brings hatred in every single form. We want Aliyah that is driven by choice, that is driven by values, not that is driven by fear. And yet in France, in this country, we see that the reality has changed. And people see that what they thought ended in the Holocaust is still very much there. But when they come to Israel, we have a different promise waiting for them. I'd like to share with you a specific story of a family from Ukraine. And I think that this will also bring it closer to you to understand how many miracles can sometimes be involved in the story of just one family. This is the Grashenko family from Donetsk. You can see here on the bottom left side, that is the bombed control tower of the airport in Donetsk. I don't know if you've seen this image before. It was bombed by the Russian forces. The mother, Irina, was a doctor working at the airport. They had a typical middle-class life. They dreamt that one day they would come to Israel. 3 beautiful children. Unfortunately, their eldest daughter, Lisa, who's now 26 years old, had severe developmental problems, was living in a home away from home in a village remote from Donetsk. At the age of 24 at the time, she was not walking, she was not talking, living a very limited life. And they dreamt that one day they would come to Israel and praying that sometime it would happen. The war strikes, their home is bombed, the airport is bombed, they see no way out, and they realize that the dream that they had for years, now is the time for it to happen. They contact the Jewish Agency. We tell them that we have a refugee center set up outside of Dnieper and that we can welcome them there if they can make the ride to a certain checkpoint where we can meet them. This is a war going on. Russians bombing, Ukrainians bombing, checkpoints set up, civilians are not allowed to move. We send in assistance to bring them in. I can't explain exactly how, and we say that we will meet you. But they say to us, we have to bring Lisa. We can't leave Lisa behind in this home where she's living. They drive, they have to go through 10 checkpoints, first Ukrainian checkpoints, then Russian checkpoints. They're stripped naked, they're interrogated. Any money they had is taken from them. They reach 1.5 miles from where Lisa is living. They walk to reach her. They carry in their arms, this mother and father, they carry 24-year-old Lisa in their arms to bring them to the car, drive back the checkpoints, reach our refugee center, have a little breather, and then they head to the airport. Lisa has an epileptic seizure. I don't know if anyone here is a doctor or familiar with airport procedures. You can't bring someone on a plane with an epileptic seizure. The mother says it was as if a miracle. Every person they met along the way as if was blind to the fact that Lisa has an epileptic seizure. They just let them pass, let them pass, let them pass. They arrive in Israel. Next slide. They arrive in Israel and are welcomed by the Jewish Agency to a program we run with a kibbutz in the north. The mother starts a program to get her license recognized in Israel. The son, Alex, and the younger daughter get into a Israeli school. The father starts studying towards a new profession, working in a factory in Israel. And they say it's as if they arrived in a different dimension All of a sudden, everything is green. People are smiling. People are helping them. They understand that they arrived to the true place where they dreamt to be. And if you need one more miracle to add to this story, look at Lisa. What does it appear that she's doing? Smiling. What position does it look like she might be in? She's standing. When they came to the kibbutz, Lisa was placed into a program that gave her, for the first time in her life, proper medical care. And I'll remind you, they came from Ukraine. They didn't come from some godforsaken place. The mother is a doctor, but for the first time in her life, Lisa gets proper medical care. She's walking. I met this family, it's true. This is just one example, one story of how God works in these mysterious, inspiring, and unbelievable ways that remind us what is our place in the world and how we might fulfill a tiny bit of that role. And you can see it also so clearly in the Bible. Are you familiar with this verse? Do you know what's special about this verse? It refers to the planting in Israel, to how you go from Aliyah, from the ascension, from coming back home, to how you go to being planted in the land of Israel, in the immediate term and in the long term. And it says here that God will rejoice over planting his people with his whole heart and his whole soul. Do you know how many other places in the Bible it is said that God will do something with his heart and soul? Can you guess? How many more times? This is the only place in the entire Bible where it is said that God will do something with his heart and soul. The only place in the entire Bible, and it refers to bringing his people back home and planting them assuredly in this land. So if we need a little bit more encouragement to what we're working towards, to what we're praying for, I think you can find it here. So at this moment, I'd like to wish you huge success in your work towards strengthening Africa, strengthening your communities, bringing your diasporas back home, making their connection with your continent, with your beautiful land strong. I'd like to thank you for your prayers for Israel, for your standing by Israel, for your rallying for Israel. And I wish that each and every one of you will find their role, their God-given role, in working towards making Israel a praise among the nations. And ask you to remember this very special verse. God has appointed watchmen, and the role that he gave the watchmen is so important that we must remind the Lord of his promise. Who could ever think of reminding God of anything? Why would God need a reminder of anything? But this is such an important role that we must remind him, and we must remind ourselves. And may we all be watchmen on the walls of Jerusalem. Thank you, and shalom.
Thank you very much, Danielle. That was so heartening, so very inspiring. And you shared with such joy, with such a beautiful smile. It's really a celebration, the way that you presented. It's just a victory over adversity, and it shows how a nation can look after its people, how people can really be united across borders. The world really is small. You can reach your people where they are. And we're happy that you are here, that you've shared your work, your accomplishments with us. And I know that there's much more for you to do. So with those words, I'd like to open the floor for questions and answers. We have just a few minutes, about 10 minutes. And I think Pastor Shagan will be our first respondent.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Daniela, for coming and for sharing so passionately about the work of the Jewish Agency. And on behalf of the Africa Leadership Summit, I want to thank God for what you have done and what the Jewish Agency has done all over the world for the Jewish people. But I want to mention to the Assembly that the Jewish Agency is actually bigger than the Israeli government. And it has existed before any government was formed, as we heard here. And among other things that is connected to the Jewish Agency is the work of Magen Aden Adom, the Shield of David.
We have a cooperation with them, but they're a separate organization.
Yes, they're a separate organization, but it's like you look after the Jewish people, but they also look after the Jewish people, but they look, they attend to emergencies and relief all over the world. Now, we were expecting the leader of that organization also to come in, because when the Nairobi bomb blast, the U.S. Embassy was bombed in 1998, you will remember everybody was struggling. The U.S., was struggling even though they were affected. The first people to show up were the Israeli people, and they rescued Njenga. Do you remember that? Now, a couple of weeks ago, when there was that problem in Liberia, the mudslide, and sorry, it was Sierra Leone, Freetown, and lots of people died. Who responded first? It was Israel. And you could go on and on and on like that. And I want us to put our hands together for the relief assistance and that Israel continues to give to the whole world. The amazing thing is that Israel really, they don't blow their own trumpet. Other people will make a lot of noise all over the world. And I was calling somebody who works for Magen Adom. I was saying, there is problem in Sierra Leone. Is there any way that you can actually help us there? Because Sierra Leone is where nobody goes. There is no big business there and all of that. And I was saying, please, is there something that you can do there? And he smiled and he said, we're already there. This was just like 24 hours. And they were there already. Please give another hand. Okay, the reason why I stood up to comment is to ask you a question, which I have already asked Professor Jerry Garner, and he gave me the permission that I could stand up here and moot the idea. And we have had this conversation about a year ago when we visited the Jewish Agency with Mama Gobodo, Apostle Linda Gobodo. She brought a peace offering on behalf of South Africans to Israel, because South African government has not been doing well in its relation with Israel. South Africa government has been supporting in many ways the BDS campaign all over the world and the Israel apartheid narrative. So she brought a peace offering, and she requested that I should represent Africa. And so we came together and we met with the Jewish Agency group. And the moment that we started talking with the Jewish Agency, I looked at the work and I said, but this is what is missing in Africa. We are relying on the government to do the work of development and the work of transformation, and the government is not delivering because there are no people who actually own the state. The government is owning it. Now, there is no way we can have development when the government is actually the owner of the land and of the state and of the people. It's not going to work. It's too much power we have given to our government. And I want to ask you, let's think about it. What would happen if we were to establish an African agency? what would happen? What would happen? How would it look like? Would it help the Africans in the diaspora to come home and be involved in development in their villages? Will the Jewish Agency be willing to help us so that we can learn from them? They're already over 100 years old. I'm just thinking aloud. There are other ideas in my mind already, but I'm asking us to think. This is the time for Africa, and we need to chart a new course for our continent, and we need to dream with God, and we need to be bold. We need to be courageous. And I believe that some of the things that the city builders and the nation builders is trying to establish can actually thrive under an agency like the African Agency. But I'll leave it for the elders here to think about it and to come up with a resolution before we complete this conference, whether that is something that we would like to do. But the question that you may want to answer is, if we were to decide to do that, will the Jewish Agency be open to cooperate, to partner with Africa?
What do you think I'm going to say? Well, of course, the answer is yes. I can share with you that I too believe that it is time for Africa, even if it's just because of the Shakira song that was so good. But I too believe that it is time for Africa, and Africa has its own sets of huge challenges. I can tell you that we have been contacted by different governments around the world, if it's countries, small countries like Macedonia and Moldova, and if it's big countries like Germany and France, that have been talking to learn from us about how we connect young people to their identity, how we connect them to Israel, people in the diaspora. How do we bring in this cooperation, this feeling that we are one people, and that maybe you are a person of African origin living in America, but your heart and your roots are actually in Africa. How do we do that with the Jewish people, how you might do it with your people? We have many models. I can tell you that the work is very complicated. It constantly evolves. We're now looking at how we can use social media in service of this kind of work. But there's some basic models that have to do with how do you learn, how do you experience, how do you connect, and how do you bring together and build a people. So the answer is again, yes.
I cannot miss this opportunity on behalf of ALS and of South Africa to thank Danielle. I'm amazed at the passion. When we met her, I left there with a burden in my heart and an understanding that the church in South Africa was very vocal before our liberation to tell our story. The whole world knew about apartheid and the situation in South Africa because of the church in South Africa. But at the end, when we got the liberation, the church went quiet. And I realized when she spoke to us and took us through the whole story of her grandparents coming here and the whole work of the Jewish Agency in the manner that she has, I'm amazed at the passion, because I was captured by that passion when she was talking to us when we visited the Jewish Agency, that the work that the church started should not have stopped. We should have continued that work, even because the church, the Jewish Agency is really above the government in the sense that it reaches all the people of Israel, whether in Israel or outside Israel. So the 13 million Jews, the Jewish Agency is able to connect with them. So there's work to be done. I realized that this idea of a Jewish Agency is a good idea even for us. And I kept on saying that is the thing that I was telling people, that I learned something there that we should have continued. Now, we're faced with a situation in America, especially in the sense that the people who left Africa, the shores of Africa, in 2019, it would be exactly 400 years. There might be an exodus, especially because of the feeling of the people against the present president. You know, especially the African Americans are not happy with the president, and they don't know where this thing is going to go. But the fact that it's going to be 400 years in 2019, and I don't think we are ready for an exodus of people coming back to Africa, you know, so there's a lot we can learn from you. You know, I think a time for an African agency or Africa agency is not just a dream. It's a reality because of what we might face in a year's time as Africa. So I just want to say thank you for coming. I was excited when I saw that you are coming because of how we were received when we brought the peace offering. Thank you.
And it was a wonderful meeting we had then, and I remember how you spoke about that we should have also had a Jewish agency. And I will tell you, our organization is not perfect, and we have our whole set of challenges, but I believe that we were what Israel needed, and we still are what Israel needed, and if you can learn from us.
Thank you. I think the idea moved by Pastor is very, very, very important. I just a rider to his idea and the last speaker. I want to say that we need to be concrete. You mentioned elders. Already, I'm sure Professor Ghana is one of them. The last speaker, I think, suggestion. So I think you should have like 5 or what number? And call them. And let's get the feedback. It's better than to make it loose, okay?
You know, I can tell you what our structure was at the time. We had a settlement department, we had a state department. You can copy paste.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for sharing with us your journey, your experiences, even your aspirations, even your limitations as an agency. We look to emulate the Jewish Agency, as you've heard, and we're very glad that you are here with us. And may you go well. Thank you very much.
And please continue the rallying that you're doing for Israel when you step at the side of Israel. As you said, dear Linda, it's so complicated with South Africa also in the relationship with Israel. And here you see there was a stately visit, and things do happen. I heard from our ambassador to Ethiopia, Ambassador Barainer Zavadia, who also represents Israel to the African Union. She was telling me about the grave challenges she has. On the one hand, the African Union awards Israel a prize on their fight against Ebola. On the other hand, they don't invite her to the ceremony. So many challenges. So please, I'm saying this not just on behalf of the Jewish Agency, but really on behalf of Israel. We need you, we need your friendship, we need your strength in your communities and in your countries. And if you could please speak to the African Union to invite us next time to the award ceremony, that would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Hallelujah.